Hello and a very warm welcome back to Widowed AF. You're here with me. I'm your host. I'm Rosie Gilmoss. I have exciting news today, listeners. I've got a boy in the studio. Welcome, Andrew. How are you?
I'm very good.
I say boy, you're very much a man.
Well, a man on the outside, very definitely a boy on the inside.
I think, the same could be said for most of your gender, but we won't dwell on that.
Yeah, to a certain age, and then you start going back down again. That's how.
Yeah, I think that I'm really enjoying middle age. I'm sort of re-embracing all the stuff I liked as a kid. It's fantastic. Now, regular listeners to the show may recall an episode with Kirsty Ann Clough, and it was I've written it down so I don't get it wrong. It's season 2, episode 3. And in that episode, Kirsty told us that she was in a very lovely relationship with a man called Andrew. Well, here we are. This is the Andrew. Andrew Medlycot, is that a correct?
Oh, well done. Very well.
As I was practicing, I was like, these guests just make these names up to try and trip me up, I swear. So, Andrew, you're actually here to talk to me about losing your wife, Viv, to bowel cancer. So that is primarily why you're here. But I'm sure I'm interested, I'm sure my listeners will be, to hear a little bit about you and Kirsty and how you met. So I think when you're ready, in your own time, tell me a little bit about Viv, tell me how you met, and we'll get to the gruesome bit when we get there.
Yeah, we met back in 2002. We were both living in Newcastle at the time. I live in Scotland at the moment, but my voice and my accent, you can really tell, is not a Scottish accent.
But it's quite hard to place, though, because I was trying to place it, and I don't like to guess.
Accent. It's never been a strong accent. If I'm in Newcastle, it gets stronger, but I've never had a strong one to start with, so it's...
Ben was from Manchester, and if we went any further north than Watford, it would suddenly get much more prominent.
Well, I've been in Scotland for 24 years now, I think, so it's had time to lose its edge a little bit, should we say.
What took you to... Actually, no, you tell the story. I'll ask the questions after.
Yeah, make a little note of that one. Come back to it.
I am.
Yeah, so it's 2002, and Viv was the partner at that time of my housemate's work colleague. Makes sense. So
Andrew,
and that's a whole story to itself at the time.
Scandal.
So I don't think that I saved her at the time because it wasn't a great place that she was in, and I think I was a neutral outsider from outside the group, and she opened up to me and we started talking, and it just kind of led from there. And I'll not say too much about that because they get quite messy. But yes, so that's how we met, and it was 2002, and our first day was on a little beach in Tynemouth called King Edward's Bay, and it was on the 1st of September in 2002. And I have to
romantic.
September
that
because that date's very important, the 1st of September. So.
Oh, okay. All right.
So we lived in Newcastle we didn't live together in Newcastle. We were together in Newcastle for only for a few months. And then the whole sort of breakup side of her life before that meant that she wanted to get closer to her mum, to be with her mum, because she was back in Scotland. And so she moved back up to Scotland, and within a few months I followed back up as well. And I moved up here and just decided I was going to do it, So
that answers my question, actually, because I was going to say, how did you end up in Scotland?
So yes, I followed a woman. So I was very lucky that my job at the time made it very easy to just transition up here, and we moved up here, and sort of started our life together.
And you must have been quite young, because Viv, I think, is around my age, so you must have been quite young.
Well, she passed away. She was just over. It was 1 month to the day past her 40th birthday when she died. And we've been together for 12 years. Look at that time. I'm trying to get with age race. I lose track a little bit of time.
Yeah, don't worry. I barely know. I always have to check what day it is
on
the actual day.
She was a couple of years younger than me, but we weren't in our teens. We both had careers and jobs and things with her, and so life was kind of like that's how things kind of went. And then exactly 5 years after we met, so on the 1st of September in 2007, we got married up in Scotland, and 5 years to the day after that, on the 1st of September in 2012, we had our little boy, Riley, on the same day. So we met on the 1st of September 2002. We got married on the 1st. We got married the 1st of September 2007, which was exactly 5 years after. And then Riley was born 1st of September 2012, which is exactly 5 years to the day after that. So yeah,
and you literally can't plan that, can you? Although
he was literally born like almost 10 to midnight on that day. So Viv was all dressed up in nice fancy gowns. We were going to go out for lunch for our anniversary. So we turned up at the hospital and we were both dressed up to the nines, all nice and smart. And
what a way to give birth.
So we had all these, you have your baby plan about what you're going to do, and we want to have this and that, and all out the window because you were literally just out the door in the car for lunch and ended up there.
Well, I'll tell you what is weird is I have 2 children who are September. One is the 2012 and he's the 5th. But my daughter, when I've just said you can't pick a date, I was scheduled for a C-section with my youngest. And they rang me and said, we booked you in for the 31st of August. And I went, is there any chance that you can move it to September because of the school year? I don't know if it's the same in Scotland, but that cut-off is 31st.
It's different. Yeah, but I remember from being in England, that's what it was, yeah.
So they either start school at, she was born on 31st. She started school straight as she was, anyway, as it happened. And they rang me back and said they've managed to get me in. But yeah, I don't know why I'm sharing that with you, but it felt interesting at the time.
Are you ready for some more number 5s? So...
Oh, okay.
Viv's birthday was the 5th of May, which is the 5th of the 5th.
Oh, look at that.
And then...
So you had a little boy, did you say, in 2012? And are you happy to name him?
He's Riley, yes.
Right, you did, yes, sorry. Yes, of course you did, sorry.
So he's just turned 12 now, so...
Yeah, he's the same age as Hector, my middle son.
Yeah, so he was 5 in Russell's room, so it's been...
Yeah, same. So were you 2018 as well?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so you've had this baby.
Yes.
Life's looking pretty good.
It is.
And when does Viv start to sort of feel unwell?
It's quite strange. So we literally just moved house. We moved house down the road in the same development from just into a bigger house. So we just bought this house, and this is going to be our last house.
Home.
We're living the suburban dream. We both had good jobs, good careers. We got the nice house. And we moved in the November, I think it was. And all during that year, when Vivi given birth, it was a slightly traumatic birth, ended up being an emergency section, and so she had a few complications from that. Piles being one of them.
Oh God, yeah.
So she'd had IBS sort of all of her life anyway, but the IBS was getting worse, and she was having a bit of bleeding happening. But because of her age at the time, so she would have been 36 at that time, 36, 37.
Mm-hmm.
They just wrote it off to being, it's just your IBS, it's just playing up, or it's just from birth, there's been a bit of damage there, and you're just going to have an intermittent problem with the bleeding. It's fine, off you go. And that kind of went on for, almost a year. And then around about the end of the year, she started to lose weight as well. Despite eating the same, nothing changed.
Mm-hmm.
She started to lose a little bit of weight. And, at that point, I think she particularly was like, something's not quite right here. Something's not kind of adding up. So we're back to the doctors again, and we're a little bit more insistent this time on saying that there's something's wrong. So they took blood tests and all sorts of things, and checked all the blood. And this is one thing which is stuck in my mind, and it's to this day is one of the things that I regret not doing something about. But we went back to the doctors after the blood tests, and the young guy that's there, that I'm not going to name, for some strange reason, whether it was just to put us at ease or as a little jokey thing, but he had the blood test, and he jokingly said his first words were, "You'd be glad to know it's not cancer," and those words came out of his mouth. And it's like, we never thought about it. We never did think about it after that, but it was just like a comment that he made. And we never thought much about it. We just thought, oh, well, okay, it's fine. Blood tests are all good. It's fine. And then a couple of months later, things just weren't getting better and things were getting worse. So we went back, and Viv insisted on having some sort of exploratory work done. And the thought was that it was just either her Crohn's, IBS had sort of manifested itself into Crohn's or into, what's the one called? It's a colitis type thing or something.
Oh, is it colitis?
It's totally gone now.
We could be here for ages.
One just born and testing, one of those, But the IBS had progressed. So they sent her for a colonoscopy. And when the poor guy went to insert the camera, he he couldn't, because there was a huge tumour in a colon that was blocking everything, and that was it. He was shocked and floored. Unfortunately, because he was the one that had done the investigatory work, he had to be the one that then gave us back the results. So he had to be the one that said that there was something in the way, and he wasn't prepared for that at all. So it meant that the whole process of being told by him was also quite traumatic, because the medical profession was also highly distressed, because he just discovered this.
So when the results of the blood test had come back, and the first word said there's no sign of cancer, and I'm thinking every time we go to the doctors, we think we've got cancer, right? Every blood test. And so that sort of immediate, it's not cancer. The fact that he's mentioned it at all could be put down to just a sort of general reassurance. Yeah. But was there no sign of it in the blood test?
Well, we don't know.
Was it a mistake?
I have no idea. After that, and since then, and going through treatment of things, we know that you have blood tests done, and there are markers in your blood that they use to sort of check the activity of your cancerous tumour. So there are markers in your blood that do change and are influenced by cancer in your body. So, if were they there and he just had looked at them and that was a factual thing to say, but it can't have been, because at that particular point in time, it was there, because once
the tests
came along and we found that, and we went for all of her scans, it was discovered that it spread everywhere. It was in her liver quite aggressively and in her lungs. It wasn't like it had just started. It's been there for some time. So even if it had been picked up earlier in that year, or when they first started to notice symptoms, would it have changed things? I don't know whether it would or not, because when we found it, it was so
that's always the big what if, isn't it?
It may not have made a difference, but just him saying that, and I kept thinking I need to go and say something. I should go and say something about that particular GP and say it was just, how dare he say that? When just 2 months later on, we find out that she's riddled with it, and it's. But time's passed, and it's done.
It's terrifyingly common, though. And you may or may not be familiar with John's first wife, Sarah. She died from bowel cancer.
Yes, I heard she mentioned what happened there. So,
and she had a genetic disposition. She had the BRCA gene, so she was more likely to be at risk of bowel cancer. And then when she presented with symptoms which were quite horrific, she was told it was norovirus and sent home. Mm-hmm. And John believes that she'd be here today. He said he doesn't think she'd be a terribly well woman, and she would have certainly had problems, but she potentially could have been here. And actually that anger that can be created by that, because you need somebody to blame, and there's a frustration, and it happens horrifyingly frequently, where young people present with what are cancerous symptoms, and they're sent home, and I don't know what the solution is. I wish I did, but that must have been such a huge shock. Were you actually with her when she went for the colonoscopy?
Yeah. Every single chip.
Of course she did. I knew you'd say it.
There, so. But I mean, it's one of those things. I mean, I've since had my diagnosis with my neurospiciness. I've always had a fidgety test and tics and all sorts of things. And when we had our first meeting with the oncologist and things, explaining the gist of it, I had I was like a hole in my hand there, because my thumb, my thumb was just twitching away like mad. And it wasn't until they put a hand on my hand to stop me doing it that I looked down, and it's like, oh my God, I've literally worn. Yeah. Because it was just, I couldn't kind of comprehend what I was hearing.
And in that moment, there obviously. Oh, sorry. No, carry on.
I was going to say, because there's another element of that as well, which kind of influenced my feelings around it as well, which was the morning that Viv was going for the colonoscopy. Like I say, we'd never ever thought about it being cancer. Never crossed our minds. But we were getting ready to go out for the colonoscopy, and in the bedroom, and I just said, what if it's cancer? And we never discussed it before. And I, the next day, and for years afterwards, took that as I made that happen.
Oh, right.
Because
so isn't it funny how powerful we think we are?
Just came up my mouth that morning, and that was it. So,
well, you probably know the story of me stood in the school playground saying, if Ben dies tomorrow, I'll have no idea how to pay my electric bill, whilst he's dead. And it makes you shiver, doesn't it?
Yeah. If I hadn't said that, would it have changed things? Probably not. But
no.
Because I think that's the one and only time I've ever said it, and it's on that day.
It was actually my mum that said
it's like that was it, and it took a long time.
My mum said to me, "Rosie, you're not that powerful."
Yeah.
I was like, "Oh."
Took a lot of therapy for me to get over that stuff.
yeah, it does, doesn't it? Yeah. It does, and you think of all you're trying to, I think, retrospectively save them. Yeah. Like weirdly, you're concocting all these scenarios. So when they found this mass, this guy is obviously quite shocked.
Yes.
He's aware that this is probably something serious. What are the actual words that he used at the time?
I don't know.
I know you mean it verbatim.
Yeah, that's I don't know if it was the words that he used initially or just his
demeanour
changed. His demeanour changed, and it was, we knew something wasn't quite right. And then when he told us, you could see he had been crying because his face was
oh God, was
very red when he came to tell us, and just the way he was just so hesitant and it wasn't the best way of doing it, but we understand now, because at the time we were like, why is this person telling us? We've got questions, we can't give us the answers. He's a mess, and we understand now why he had to do it, because it was him that had been doing the exploratory work, so he had to feed back the results. But yeah, it was just as more as demeanour than that, actually, what he said.
And then you've got to go home, presumably, and Riley's at home, and you've got to try and process the next stages. And presumably you then become part of oncology and tests.
Probably one of the worst moments is when you're going from that moment of being told that there's something there to then waiting for MRI results, or MRI tests being done, and then getting to see the oncologist and speaking to them and actually finding out what it actually is. So you've got that window of being told there's something there, which is horrendous, but you still don't know what it is. So that.
And at this point, you try not to catastrophize too.
So you got that 2 week gap of just not knowing anything.
Yeah,
and afterwards, when you find out what it was, and it found out that it didn't be much worse, but at least we knew, and then we had a plan and we could do something, and that helped progress things. But actually, 2 weeks was a bit of like just no man's land. I can't actually remember really what happened during that period of time. You
probably did a lot to try and run away from it, to try and keep yourselves busy.
And this could be one of the things that some people may or may not know, but I drank a lot during that period.
Yeah, I can relate.
It was not openly, not with people, but I drank a lot during that time to try and...
No wonder, though. No wonder. This is one of the things I've been able to grow up myself compassion for, because you just think, no wonder I drank. It was awful. I hid that, and particularly neurodivergent people, we will mask those feelings any way we can. I'm going to ask you a difficult one, which you don't have to answer, but if you could, are you able to tell me a little bit about the kind of the conversation that was had where the test results have come back, and I'm picturing, the two of you thinking, "That's fine, with this, it could be curable."
Yeah, that was the way we Viv throughout the whole period, never once ever, I think, even till the day that she was unable to communicate with us, gave up on the thought of the fact that she was going to beat us. And she had that from day one. It wasn't even a question of stopping or having this take over. From day one, it was we're going to do something about this, and we're going to take it on. And there's no other question about it. And that's just how she was, literally the whole way through. Her work were really fantastic. She worked for CEPA, so it's obviously a big, which is the environment agency in Scotland.
Oh, okay.
So she worked for quite a big sort of, it's a non-government organisation, but it's effectively a government group. She was in HR, so she had a huge group of friends around her at the time who were fantastic in helping her understand what happened with work. And literally from the day that she was diagnosed and started her treatment, that she was off work. And they took care of everything from that side, which is amazing. And I can't.
It makes such a difference. It makes such a difference, because financial. peril is, most families today can't afford to have one person stop working. And, then you need to be available for hospital appointments. So suddenly, I think when employers get it right, it can transform this
honestly,
period.
they could not, and it was still keep in touch with some of them today. Not as often as we would do, but through Facebook and things to see what's happening. But they could not have been more helpful and made things any more comfortable and easier for us in that respect. So that could have took all that away.
And so when you have this conversation after the scans, obviously they started treatment.
Yes.
So at this point, are they using words like incurable or terminal?
Yes. Yeah.
Are they asked from the very beginning?
From the outset, it was, they never used words quite that dramatic. They use other words which mean the same thing, which don't sound quite as bad. So it was so the treatment, her chemo was palliative. It wasn't like it was curable treatment. It was straight on to palliative care. It was non-operable, which meant that there was no way of operating because the tumor in her colon, the oncologist, again, one of the most amazing people I've ever known, and I'll never forget him my entire life. The analogy he used was that the tumor in the colon was like the trunk of a tree. So it had grown, done its thing, and then it stopped. So it was there, but it was doing nothing. It was causing no more problems. It had set its branches out going, and that was what was in her lungs and liver. But the tumors in her liver and lungs weren't individual tumors. It was like glitter. It was like a sprinkling of tumor everywhere, so there's nothing to operate to and move. So that meant that she couldn't have an operation. But the thought of being that once you started on chemo, it might start to reduce those down, and if it did then just leave a few individual ones that could be seen, they could potentially be surgically removed. But unless that happened through the chemo, it was non-operable from day one. But
there's a little bit of hope there, isn't there? There's a tiny little thread of hope, or maybe.
Yes.
I'm a mum, and the thought of being told that I would die, I might die, is one of the most horrible thoughts. We fear that more than we fear our own death. It's the impacts, and I feel, oh, sorry, but
no, you got me going. I thought I'm going to do this without crying.
I've got I got a whole toilet roll just in case.
I'm nothing. I've got some cotton wool buds. So you
got a sleeve, haven't you? Just like the rest. And I'm trying to get in Viv's head a little bit and wonder. I mean, she must have been absolutely terrified.
I can't imagine. I couldn't put myself in her head because I have no idea how that must feel.
No.
How you come to terms with that and comprehend that background. But
I'm how did you explain it?
I don't know whether her determination that she was going to beat this, whether that changed things, and it gives her that hope of thinking, well, I haven't got to have this conversation because it's not going to happen.
But do you think that sometimes can prevent the big conversations being had? Were you and her able to talk about the well, it wasn't a possibility, it was the impending death?
Towards the end, we had lots of conversations about that. But that wasn't until a couple of years into things, and it wasn't until
she lived quite long with such a voracious cancer.
So once from the point of diagnosis and treatment of things, it was about 2.5 years before she died.
And what was her quality of life?
Annoyingly, on the sort of bell charts of like expectancies, it was bang on the average expected, which is a bit annoying that, which we couldn't have just changed that a little bit.
The one time you don't want to be average, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
what was her quality of life like during that time?
It wasn't too bad. But again, I think that was more down to her determination to beat this. I think it was worse than she'd earned. I mean, one thing that people always said about, and that one of the lasting things about her was that she was always smiling. Whenever someone came to see her, or she went out to do things, she was always smiling. And to this day, people that knew her and would speak to her always come on the fact that she was just always smiled, despite what would have been going on inside. Because with her chemo, the regime that she went on, meant that it was every 2 weeks. So every 2 weeks she'd go to the hospital and she'd have an infusion that would last all day. And then she'd come home with a little kind of like pressurized ball that she would keep plugged in, and that would continue the treatment going for another 40 hours. And then she'd be disconnected every 2 weeks before the next one. And the few days after the treatment, it would have an effect, and you could see it was wearing her down. But normally, by the end of that week and then the following week, she would be in a state of being able to have a fairly normal life.
And then she'd have to start the whole thing all over again.
But in her typical stoic way, instead of just doing that for a few months and then stopping, whilst it was working, she just asked him to just keep going. So she just kept her chemo going continuously until there was signs that it was not working for, and the oncologist said it's time to stop. So she put herself through quite a tough regime.
What an ordeal.
Of running it, yeah. But, it's hard to tell whether.
And at what point did you start to speak to Riley about this? Because he would have been very young at the point of diagnosis.
We never had the conversation with him that his mum was terminally ill.
Mm-hmm. It's a big thing to explain, right?
Yeah, but we never heard anything from him. So when the district nurses would come to disconnect her from her chemo pump and things, and she had a PICC line in, which is the line that goes in your arm, around into your heart and things. When that came to be dressed and cleaned with the district nurse, we'd never hide him away. He would come and sit and leave with the nurse. He would sit around there while she was doing Mummy's things, So we never hid that from him. We never hid the bad days when she was feeling poorly and she was in bed all day. But we never said what the ultimate end result may have been.
And it's this kind of, to say to a child, Mummy is going to die.
Right.
I mean, that's going to ruin the time that they've got with them as well, to a certain extent.
So after about a year or so, Viv started to write journals and things. So I think we had an inkling that things may not go the way they were. So she started to make notes and write things, and she actually wrote a book. Right, so she had a journal where she wrote stories and things in it, which I've never read. Her mum
haven't you?
That. So her mum has that, and she reads that to Riley. But she
wrote.
Oh
my God,
that's so it's like letters and stories to Riley, talking about her life and our life and what's going on and all sorts of things.
Oh my God, this is good. That's going to get me. What a lovely thing to do. I mean,
which is fantastic for him, because obviously he has to.
How come you've not read it? Do you think you're just not? No, I can't watch videos.
I've never listened to her voice on video.
I've got one voice note that I've listened to, and I can't watch videos. I feel like I'm getting to the point where I'm ready.
Yeah, I still haven't listened to her voice since. Yeah,
it's weird, isn't it? It's something that seeing them animated makes me. I'm not ready.
And I can't put it. I don't know why, because it's not real.
And do you know what? It doesn't matter, does it?
It's just become.
It doesn't matter.
It's been so long. It's become.
Yeah, then it becomes such a big thing because you've left it for so long. But what a beautiful, beautiful gift to leave for him. That's magical.
And I was never quite sure what to do with it. And then I just thought, I don't know if I had the strength to read this. And I was very conscious about making sure that her mum and Riley had extra.
Yeah,
it was the bond over. So I eventually just said, we have this book, which she knew about, and said, do you want to have it so that you can read what's in it, and then you can get strength from it, or get what you want to get from it, but then also you can have that with Riley, and that could be something that you have
that's lovely
to do with him. So
I think that's really special.
And I think she has gone through some of it and read some things to him and shown him it and things. So
and for him to have that, because losing a parent at that age, the memories are like grains of sand.
Yeah.
And my boys have said, they feel like Dad's memory slipping through like an egg timer. And actually, one of the things I suggested to Holly that she do for Christmas this year is maybe get a sort of journal for her aunt and her grandmother, and that they sort of document Sarah's life, because obviously John knows her for a period in her life, but I think you want to hold on to as many memories as possible, and as much. I think children have this thirst to know more about the parent that they've lost, and and what a lovely legacy to leave.
I mean, the thing is that I don't know how many actual real memories he'll have given his age.
No.
I don't. I'm sure there'll be some in there that actually are true memories that he remembers from being there, experiencing it. But everything that he knows about his mum is only ever going to be third hand or second hand,
And that's really sad, isn't it?
Yeah, it makes it difficult. I say as time goes on, those stories and those feelings and memories, they're never going to go, but
but they do fade.
Details will fade, and so.
My eldest was 7, and he said he got quite upset once and said he couldn't remember Dad's voice, and I have to try really hard, and then I find when you picture them and you're picturing a photograph and you think, oh no, like surely I'm not picturing photographs now. It's hard to
differentiate between what are you remembering? You can overthink it where we our mind type does overthink these things.
Oh yeah, of course. Of course.
And he gets stuck in this vortex of doom. But
and all these scenarios that we think are going to happen as well, but don't. But in your case, this particular scenario did head south, and after, would you say 2.5 years she had
it was Christmas, so the diagnosis things all happened around sort of January, February time. And it was 2 years after that, it came up to Christmas, and she'd just been coming on another really heavy bout of chemo. And again, it had been successful, and we never got rid of tumours. Some of the chemos would massively shrink it again, but then whenever she stopped, they'd come back, but then the chemo would work again. But there was only about 2 or 3 different types of drug that they had available. So as one finished, the next time they had to go on chemo, it had to be a different drug because
you can't repeat it.
Can't repeat it because it's become resistant to that drug. So we're almost done the third one. It'd be really successful. And we got to Christmas, and it was decided to have a break at Christmas just to allow her to be able to enjoy Christmas without having, the side effects and things. And there'd been a bit of reduction from that. And then when we stopped over the Christmas, it only took a few weeks before I think we could tell that things had really started off again. And I can't remember dates at this particular point after that, but went back for more scans, and it was just back with a vengeance. And at that particular point, it was, there's nothing more we can do. And from that point, it was so fast that the rate of things changed. So it kind of caught us a little bit by surprise, I think. So we literally had 2 years of almost stability, and then we just
bam,
rolled at the end like a snowball. So.
And did Viv go into hospice at the end?
Yes. So we had, that was another discussion. That was another kind of quite hard bit to kind of get through. But this district nurse that we had, Lynn, was amazing, and she really got on well with Viv, and they got quite close and had a really good bond. And as time was getting on, Viv was becoming more sort of bedbound in effect, because she couldn't get up a room through just the fatigue and pain and all these sorts of things. And we had to get to this point of having the discussion about what to do, whether she stayed at home or whether she went somewhere. And Viv was very much about wanting to stay at home, where she was comfortable in her own house and all those sorts of things. But I wasn't quite sure how I felt about that. I was through talking with Lynn, the nurse, that the way she put it made it a lot easier for me to decide. And she said, if she stays at home, you're not going to be her nurse. So what you can do as nurse, you can't grieve, cry, sit and hold her hand. You're her nurse. If she goes into hospice, she can be her husband. She can sit there and hold her hand and be there and support her that way. And that's what I wanted to do. So that was what my thoughts were. They've still had a bit of resistance to that. But through the speed of things changing, she got to the point where she was in constant pain and discomfort and had no quality of life, and never left the bedroom. And it literally took Lynn, the nurse, to sort of sit on the bed. She was climbed on the bed. Out of my head, I visualised her getting her shoulders going. But she can't have done that. She must have done that. But that's how I was visualised it, to say, look, I understand you want to stay here, but he needs to go. It's you have to do it. It's the best thing for you to do. You'll regret not doing it. Let's just go, even if it's just to go there and have a look. We need to get you there. And she listened to Lynn, and she was like, okay. let's do it.
Don't listen to you though.
Yeah.
Okay. That's vibes. And it's one of the most heartbreaking decisions to have to make is to go to hospice, because people that go to hospice very rarely come back out.
Yeah.
And so it's that end point.
It's final, because it's control. It's
surrender, isn't it?
You know, and that's the last bit of control that they have. And to give that up must be horrendous.
Yeah. And I've heard this sort of comments from hospice before, in that you get to go back to being their partner and loving them and grieving for them, because in that moment, if you are a full-time carer, you're right, it's a 24-hour job. You can't make the time to have conversations with them, to, I don't know, just to sit and hold hands with them, the things that you want to do when you know your time is limited. And when she went into hospice, was she immediately made more comfortable?
Instantly. I mean, it was she got there, she had a lovely room with plenty of doors that went out to a lovely garden and things. And they got her on the syringe driver and got the drug sorted out. And I think literally within a few hours of being there, I think, and obviously I don't know, but it's just how from seeing her, I think she got there and realised that this was the right thing to do. And she relaxed, and it's almost like that was the point where she thought,
I'm done.
I'm doing nothing to her out, because she sorry, I was going to do this.
No, it's fine.
She within a few hours there, she lost consciousness. She
oh my goodness!
And she was just asleep. So whether it was the drugs that were sedating her or what happened, but literally within very, very short time of being there, she just relaxed and then it was 4 days after that she died.
Oh my goodness!
So it was. I maintain if she hadn't gone into the hospice, she would have stayed at home and she would have fought.
Mm-hmm.
And she may have got another couple of days or something, but she would have stayed there
in agony.
But she got there, and it was literally the feeling. I don't believe in spirits and all sorts of things, but it's almost like she just thought, okay,
yeah,
I can relax then.
Some people die when their loved ones leave the room, don't they? Yeah. It's like that permission is granted. I feel really sad for you and really sad for Viv. And this woman just sounds so incredible. When she did die, were you there?
I was there, yeah. When she went to the hospice, I never left that room for the 4 days.
Yeah.
So I stayed there, slept there. I never left the room.
And that's the beauty of a hospice, isn't it? You can.
Go and eat.
No.
I literally stayed in that room for the full time. And then when friends came.
And what did you do? Did you listen to music or anything?
Even Riley came to visit sometimes as well. So, but going back to Riley, we're talking about speaking to him. I don't know if it was cowardly or not, but I didn't actually have to have that conversation with him, because the consultant from the hospice, when she sat with me, she was saying, hey, how is things with Riley? And I said that he's never been told that she will die, that she's very, very ill. And she said, well, do you want me to speak to him? So she took us both into a room, and a nurse came in as well, and we sat there, and she kind of obviously it's not her first time doing this, but the ways that she talked to him, she just talked about, and she was asking questions about what he was thinking, or how was happening, or how does he plot money, and what did he think was going to happen, and she just talked him around to tell him what was going to happen. Sorry. and it was I can't use the word beautiful, because it's not a beautiful thing to do, but it was just,
it's a terrible thing done in a beautiful way.
You did it in such a way that it was just, that's just, no one else could have done that.
And how did he react?
And when he cried at those times, the only times he ever probably cried is when I was crying.
Yeah.
And I still think it's because he saw me doing this, that that's how he should react.
Yeah, Hector was the same age, and he was very similar. When I told the boys, Monty burst into tears. He was 2 years older, and made the noise that we talk about. And Hector, I can really vividly remember him looking at his brother and then bursting into tears, sort of looking to him to see the example of what to do, because there is just no way they can comprehend it at 5 years old. They can't. And
but she got to see him. She we had this chat that took her back in again, and this was still while she was still able to talk, and she went in. And he spoke to her and she said goodbye. And I don't think he ever kind of took it as being like she's saying goodbye.
Goodbye.
But, so she got to do that, and that was pretty much the rest of it she got to do. And
oh my God, I'm off. It's fucking...
Sorry.
It's the thought of that walk. It's the thought of her saying goodbye and him leaving the room.
Soon, but you've got to go down to come back.
Oh, we got to dig into it, Andrew. Otherwise, there's no point.
But it's it's just funny. It's one thing that Kirsty and I often have a debate about is who had it worse.
Oh yeah, sudden or cancer. Ian.
People are going to watch this soon, and I'm going to start making jokes about things. I think when you've been through our process, you have a very warped sense of humour about death and things.
Yeah.
I apologise if I offend anybody. But
I overstepped the mark in an interview yesterday, and I was like, I'm really sorry. I might have to edit that out.
But we joke about who had it worse, because I can't, because Pete
he died very suddenly, didn't he?
Suddenly with no warning, whereas I had a lot of warning, and I can't comprehend how Kirsty went through what she did, because that to me is just the worst thing could possibly happen. Whereas Kirsty's perspective is what I went through. She can't imagine how we've done. And there's no good way of doing it, but it's just...
No, that's kind of where me and John are at, because we're the same way around. His wife died from terminal, my husband died suddenly. And you sort of think, who had it worse? Yeah, because you have that cataclysmic sort of shock when it's sudden. Mm-hmm. But with a slower death, you have to watch the person you love die. You lived for 2.5 years knowing that Viv was going to die. No matter how hard you fought and how much normality you tried to retain, that must have clouded everything. It must have done.
I always talk about my grieving started when she was diagnosed.
Yeah, John says the same thing.
So, and that, I don't know whether people would find that shocking or hard to comprehend. No. I lost Viv 2 or 3 weeks after she had a diagnosis, because the girl that I married and the person that I married fundamentally changed at that particular point. And I lost that.
And I think John would definitely relate to that, actually, because he says the same thing. You said that your relationship shifts. You're not lover, partner. You are caring.
Never stopped, but that person was different. And so it's a hard thing to kind of have to go through. It's a difficult one to kind of get your head around.
Being a man who's a widower, yes. I use the word widow to encompass all people who've lost a partner on here, because otherwise it would be a very long title.
Yep.
How were things after Viv died? I'm going to imagine you were quite well supported initially, but I'm thinking of stuff like the school playground when you're the solo parent and trying to facilitate, play dates and go back to work, but also make sure that Riley was getting everything.
Well, I was very fortunate with my work at the time that they gave me like endless time to be able to be around and be there for Viv, and even for the last 6 months I was effectively not working, and they were fine with that. They were amazingly supportive. But not long after Viv died, I had to make a bit of a choice, because my work took me away a lot. I was traveling a lot, and I didn't feel I didn't have the strength in me to be able to do the job anymore to its best abilities, because my sales were empty. But also I didn't want to, and this is one of my own failings, is that I hate having to rely on other people. I don't. I always feel like I'm imposing, and I'm a burden on people, and I don't want to be that. So I stopped work altogether and thought I'd take a bit of a sabbatical from work. And again, thanks to the girls at Viv's work, they handled all of the paperwork and things, and I had a small pension that I was able to get, so it enabled me to take a little bit of time to do that.
Bit of breathing space.
So I just stopped work and I just stayed at home with Riley, so I had that time to be able to do that.
I bet you two are close, are you?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yes.
Insofar as you can be the 12-year-old boy now.
But again, that's another one which look back, it kind of, it's a really sad thing that he was always a mummy's boy, always a mummy's boy, and the two of them were thick as thieves. It was amazing to watch that. But again, without any kind of conversation or without anything that we told him, because Viv did start to slowly become more and less active, it enabled us to have a gradual transition from mummy always doing everything to then me doing more, to the point where I was doing everything, but his mum was still here. So that when she did pass away, I don't think it was the huge shock of just having daddy anymore, because we've managed to have that shift over.
And I think often when the dad is an involved parent as well, that helps, because John was with Holly. Sarah used to work on Saturdays, so John would always have have it on the Saturday, and he did a lot of the night feeds and nappies and all that sort of stuff. So the bond was there already, and then so as Sarah got sicker, he was it wasn't such a shock, so to speak. But it also, I think, as they get older, I'm noticing now they are able to reflect back and see what we did. The fact that we kept the boat afloat, terrible analogy for a drowned husband, but you know what I mean? And and yes, not everybody's able to take time off work. And that, that is something that I was able to run Ben's business, which meant I was able to be present, but try and keep us going. But it will have given you both that time to breathe. You'd have been able to be there all the drop-offs and pick-ups of school. And
so school at stage had an amazing childminder, again called Lynn as well. So the nurse's name was childminder with Lynn. Lynn is childminder, was just, again, a phenomenal person who, I credit with a lot of Riley's sort of upbringing was found to her doing that, and she saved my neck numerous times in helping with him. And, she is, and always will be someone that I'll never ever forget for what they've done to help me, because of what they did for Riley.
And it's what people do for the kids, isn't it? That's the stuff you really remember.
So ultimately, all that mattered to me at that time was just him. I don't really care what else was happening, as long as, he is okay.
Set me off again.
I know. I stopped drinking. That was one thing I had to do. I suddenly became very aware of the fact that it's just me, and I can't do anything which is going to...
So tell me, when did that happen? When did you make the choice to stop drinking?
It was pretty quick. It was a couple of weeks afterwards.
Oh, wow, that is quick. So I used it as an excuse to lean into it more.
No,
I think.
It's hard because, I was just hyper aware of the fact it was just the two of us.
Yeah.
And I was just paranoid about...
I probably should have been more concerned, but...
My drinking was also facilitated by my work a little bit as well, because I would often be drinking with work.
Yeah.
And the garage, it was full of wine as gifts for clients, which sorry if anyone work, that work is this thing that I had access to, just, countless bottles of wine. And it was to hide them in there as well. It was, and once that all went, after quitting work, it was very much I can't afford to do this.
But that means you stayed sober through lockdown as well, which is no mean feat.
Yeah.
Kudos to you for that, because I got sober.
So I was on to chapter 2 in effective during lockdown. So
yes, well let's go in on that, shall we? Yes. So you and Kirsty, if I recall correctly, you actually knew each other when you were smaller, didn't you? When you were kids.
Was 4 and I was 9. So we were like little tiny little things. I was small at one point. And and our parents, my dad and Kirsty's mum, both were doing a charity parachute jump with an airfield in Northumberland, and we both met there. And I don't know what it was that made our parents gel together, but they did. So myself and Kirsty and my sister would be at this airfield at weekends and just running wild in woods. We didn't have phones and those sorts of things back then, so we just go and get dirty, climb trees, hurt ourselves, and do all of that. So that's when we first met, and there was never nothing in it at all with any of us that I was aware. And then we got to our teens, and our lives took different routes. I used to swim competitively. I used to be a so I went off doing that thing, and
that's pretty cool, Andrew.
And things, and our lives sort of went, and our parents kept continuous down the middle. So we would always hear what was happening with each other. My mum and dad were at Kirsty's wedding. I was invited to a wedding, but I couldn't go for some reason for work. But when Pete had his heart attack the same week that Viv had her diagnosis.
Oh, wow.
So obviously, my mum and dad mentioned to me, we've heard from Kirsty's parents, this is what's happened to Kirsty. I was like, oh my God, it was terrible. And Kirsty's parents said to Kirsty, we've heard from Andrew's parents, this is what's happened to him, And so we Kirsty got back in touch through Facebook, and we've got just each other to say, I'm really sorry to hear what's happened, it's terrible. And that was kind of all it was. And then as things kind of progressed, and it's mainly after Viva died that kind of Kirsty came forward and said, look, it's a scary world out there in the widowed world. If you need any help, I'm here. Her daughters were similar ages to Riley when they lost their dad. If you want the kids to kind of get together to see if they can form any sort of kind of connection, to see if that helps. And just there's nothing in it. It was just the
classic Kirsty.
The shit show. I'm here to help if you want to. We happen to live very close because they were in Scotland as well. All of our families was still down south. So after, I don't know how long it was, 6 months, 8 months-ish, they have horses as well, and outdoor land and all that sort of stuff. It was,
that's an easy sell for a kid, that one, isn't it?
We'll see. So we came up and got together, had a coffee, got the kids, and the kids seemed to get on okay. And then it sort of just led to more regular phone calls and then more regular coming up to visit. And there was never any intention or plan of anything. I think it just
evolved.
Happened. And then before I think either of us really knew what was happening, it was like,
bang!
What's happening here? It's, but it didn't feel wrong. If that makes sense. And it just sort of took off from there. And what made it even better was the fact that, and what we've seen from watching other couples that we know that have got potentially just one widowed part, we don't have any of this awkwardness of having another person in the room.
I was going to ask you about
that I talked about every single day, and there's no jealousy or awkwardness or uncomfortable feelings. We can just be this one big blended family, including everybody else, and it just feels like
it just works. When it works, right? It works, and I'm sure that you're like us. Some days there's moody preteens, and the washing is and you think, oh my God, what have we done? But those are just things that happen in any family as well.
Well, your perspectives change though, and when those things happen, you don't read as much into them. You think, well, it's just an argument. It could be a lot worse. No, it could be a lot worse because we've been through a lot worse.
And do you all live together now?
No, we don't live together. We live
not cross that Rubicon yet.
About 200 meters apart at the moment.
Oh, that is the dream.
It's partly the logistics because there would be 5 of us.
Yes.
It's partly a benefit issue as well because Kirsty's still going.
Yes, of course. Yes.
To come through, and if we live together, some of our benefits would stop.
Same with the police as well, I think.
So it'll stay that way for the time being.
Don't change it. That's the dream. 200 meters away, you got your own space. You can keep the romance alive.
But it just works. But but we have everyone just comes and goes, small houses, and it's just one.
Yeah.
It's one house, but it's just split over 2 wings. So
I've never been to Scotland. I think I might try and come and visit you guys because you are awesome.
Because we live in an absolutely amazing, beautiful part of the country, and it's nice up here.
Well, you guys are there. That's nice enough. You mentioned that you've had therapy, which I'm always really encouraged by, that more men seem to be accessing therapy.
Yes.
Did you start when Viv was poorly, or did you start after she died?
I started first sought help when Viv was diagnosed, and I was having real trouble, and its manifestation that was worse. Would I'd be driving and I'd be going from where I live to Dundee, which is an hour drive away to get there. And I started driving, and I'd be fully conscious, obviously functioning,
disassociate,
and then I'll be in Aberdeen, which is like an hour and a half past Dundee, and I'm like, I'm not quite sure how I've...
And it's scary, right?
And I'm, okay, and that started to happen more and more often, and it got to the point where I was getting scared by it. Being a man, I didn't really know what to do, and all sorts of things, and it took a lot for me to actually accept it and go to the doctors and do something about it. And then I did that. I got put into antidepressants at the time, and literally within days,
for everything.
Night and day difference. It's like, oh, why didn't I do this so long time ago? So that was my first sort of step into taking some sort of steps to look after my mental health. But that was it, and I thought that was it. That'd be fine. I can manage the rest of it. Went through everything else. Went through the loss of faith and bereavement things. Still thinking that this is how I'm handling this. I've got issues, but I've always had those issues. But it wasn't until Kirsty was more on the scene and we were more together that I started to relax and started to think about and talk about things more, to realise that, you know, things aren't right, and it's not just a bereavement thing. There's something fundamentally
different,
causing difference, or, you know, there was a definite difference there. And Riley's got dyspraxia, and that was noticed by his childminder because all her kids got dyspraxia. So we're going through the diagnosis with him, with the local authority and the NHS and things, or CAMS as it is up here, and going through some of the forms to fill in for him, and I'm filling these forms going, oh, that's great for you, I have that. I'll do that as well. And it's like, well, actually, I think there's definitely something to do here. So actually, finally, I had one almighty, because I have a lot of panic attacks, which I never talk about with anybody. I have. I've always had the most debilitating, sometimes anxiety issues. And all through my working life, I've stood in a talk in public, and I can stand in front of a room full of thousands of people, and I come across as being the most laid-back, sociable person. I can talk to anybody. But I have
like the swan, isn't it? We're paddling beneath the surface.
This totally incapacitating panic attacks sometimes, and I've never let anyone see them or be involved in them. And I had one with Kirsty, and I eventually found it kind of quite shocking because it was physical manifestation of it was quite shocking, and it was like you need to do something and talk to somebody.
And showing somebody that vulnerability. I'm going to have to jump in here because I'm not going to let you wiggle out of it, because I think I need to acknowledge that, because as a fellow neurodiverse person, mine manifested in meltdowns, and they could be quite. I could hit things. I could. My body would sort of spasm as well. And I would be so embarrassed of anybody seeing me like this. And for me, they started to come around when I stopped drinking. And I think alcohol subdued so much of my anxiety. I know that it creates an anxiety, but if you drink enough, which I did, then you stay in a permanent
You find that tipping point, don't you, where you know where you can get to, and it has what it needs to do.
But that vulnerability and letting somebody see me in that really raw state, like I'd rather walk through the street naked than let somebody see me like that. But once I did, they ceased to hold quite so much power. And I take anti-anxiety medication, and I meditate, and I do all the things. But they are so debilitating and so terrifying.
It's almost
I've got off on a little bit of a tangent there.
It's like an epileptic fit almost, and I'm twisting, and I'm bending, and like hysterical wailing tears as well, and I don't know what. And I don't know what I don't know whether I could have stopped it on that particular day, or that it was about 2 a.m. when it happened. Whether I could have stopped it, or I could have disguised it, or what I did, but I just
let it be.
I just let it be that night, and it just kind of came out, and that, like you say, once I'd externalized it to somebody, that was a huge step to.
Because it's just another mask, isn't it? Because I cannot go out because I'd be worried that I might have a panic attack when I was out. And so then you stop doing the things you like, and then you become isolated, which adds to it. Yep. So it's a sort of self-fulfilling prophecy. Now
the bit that led onto the sort of the ADHD side of that.
That was my next question. Yeah. Well done.
So we went through all of that and started to work on that. And I would go and see the psychology department at is it the mental health hospital? It's weird. I hate it when it's a separate hospital. Just something else. I feel like I'm going to the loony bin, which I probably wouldn't.
I might just see if they check me in while I was there.
That we started to discuss the fact of, there's a lot of these traits and triggers and things that sound a lot like ADHD, and I was very skeptical because I just thought it was the big buzzword. Everyone's doing it at the moment. You do your online tests and everyone's got it, and I'm like, I don't know. But the more we talked about it, the more it seemed to be that it was. And the biggest one of that particular point, you kind of got the anxiety was sort of like we understood that. It was when I was trying to work, and I'd left my old work. I'd do a sabbatical. I'd gone back to being sort of self-employed for a while, which meant motivating myself to do things. And
that's fun with
everything's
ADHD,
great.
right?
I'm in a place in my life where I feel like I'm at one with myself, and everything should be great, and I should be. But I'm sat at my desk trying to work, and I've got the work to do there, and I've got my computer there. The house is empty. I've got a drink there. I know I've got the skills to do this with my eyes closed. I can do it. Let's get some work done, and I would sit there, and then I would just freeze.
Mm-hmm.
And I wouldn't start procrastinating or looking at YouTube, but as we sat there, like with one hand on the mouse, one hand on the edge of the keyboard, and we sat there, and then about half an hour later, I'd be going, just get up and leave your desk and go do something. But then my head starts playing on and going, well, if you leave your desk, you can't work.
So then you do nothing.
Desk, you might be able to work. So stay at your desk. And I had days sometimes where it'd be 4 or 5 hours and I'd just be sat there, stuck in this paralyzed loop of doing nothing. And that was the next thing when I just thought, this isn't. It's past being like just me being lazy or weird or quirky.
Leaving the cupboard doors open. Yeah.
It's just like, this is just not right. So I decided to go vision with that as well. And had to go private because I couldn't.
Of course.
I couldn't wait a year because at that particular point I thought it's affecting my quality of life. I need to do this now.
And also telling an ADHD they've got to wait a year. Like we don't wait.
But luckily my parents were on board with this and understood and were able to help me with going to get this done privately. And again, went through all that, started medication from that, and again, it was another night and day. And then looking back through my entire life now, I can point and identify things that have been.
Did you find there was almost a period of grief? Like, I know this sounds a kind of crazy thing to say to somebody that's lost their wife, but I almost grieved myself because the struggles, the dangers, the jobs I'd lost, the friendships I'd ruined, the kind of destruction that I've left in my wake. And I just think overall, apart from the obvious, I've had a good life. I've had good jobs. I've done great things, but you just think how much easier would my life have been and I presented with mental health problems at 11, I had eating disorders, and you just think if somebody had just screened me at that point, I don't know whether my life would have been different, but it's why I went from being one of these mums that says, no, you don't need to label a kid, to being the kind of mother that got my 6-year-old diagnosed with both autism, because I was like, no, I can see it in her. Let's do it now. Let's let her know who she is now. Yep. And I've spoken to a few widows who've been diagnosed post-grief. And I don't know whether I kind of think maybe it's because we're going to counselling, so we look at ourselves a bit more closely. Yeah. But one of my guests, she just said, I just couldn't mask anymore. It's like the trauma just break. And you think all the scaffolding that you've put in place to manage your own ADHD without realising it crumbles. And there you are in all your kind of naked ADHD glory.
Well, that's kind of a similar sort of thing. It's that nakedness. That's saying things are good now. I feel like I'm on terms of my grief. I can be open about it, and I have a new life, which is very different, but it's good, and I'm happy, and everything's great. So there's nothing. I can't blame my work. I can't blame anything else for making me feel the way that I was feeling. There's nothing. I'm just left. It's just me, and that's when I thought it's just me. This is what I'm like when everything's stripped back. And I don't like it.
Yeah, I know. And then I got quite angry because I was like, well, I don't want to have to take ADHD medication, then the anti-anxiety medication. I don't want to have to make myself palatable for the rest of the world. Yeah.
Well, I'm quite lucky now that as I'm now on the ADHD medication has gone up the way, I'm starting to see if I can try and step down the way on some of my other drugs, because a lot of I won't say it's misdiagnosed, but a lot of the sort of anxiety, depressive symptoms that we're trying to treat with the antidepressants actually are symptoms of the ADHD. So I wanted to have those in control. I don't need to have those. But it's very much like it's a security blanket.
Oh, 100%.
So long now, the thought of not having them is just, it's worrying.
I fluctuate. I kind of get really brave and come off them. And sometimes I'll be like, I'm coming off the ADHD meds as well. I don't want to take speed anymore. And then I'll realise that I've got some work to do and I can't. Yeah. So, because I probably rang on about this book that I'm writing, but I've nearly written a book. Now, I could not have done that without the ADHD medication. I'm on a quick release. I take it after breakfast. I come to the office and I can work for 4 hours. And then it kind of leaves my system, because I found when I was on the all-day medication, this is the new podcast here, guys. You're welcome to ADHD.
I'm listening more and telling you now.
Yeah. And I found that that's helped me. But we can talk about this another time. But there's lots and lots of ways, because sometimes the full dose can land really heavy. And I digress. So should we go back into the podcast?
Just do mine.
So your life now sounds pretty good. You just said then, it's not the life you had planned. It's not the journey you thought you didn't embark on. But as a result of losing Viv, which is the most awful thing to have happened to you and Riley, you have gone on this journey of self-discovery. You've sought out treatment. You've done everything that all my guests have done. You haven't gone, well, that's it. That's over then. I'll just exist. Yep. You've made a life for yourself and for Riley. And I don't
if I didn't have Riley, sorry, but
I know.
Riley, I think it could have been very, very, very different.
Yes, I know.
But it's like if I hadn't had him, I could see myself very easily just slipping further and further and further down the slope until, and I like to think somebody would eventually stepped in and intervened, but
it's difficult.
I would have gone.
And when you're in addiction, you don't want to hear it. My mum told me repeatedly that I was drinking too much, but I just told her she was boring and was trying to ruin my life, But it is something you have to come to. And I think it's incredibly admirable that you did it so soon after Vivian's death, because for most people, and particularly ADHDs with a drink problem, that would have been an absolute catalyst for disaster.
I think it's with Candy Crush. You have to have some addiction. Candy Crush took over.
Do you know what I've done? I started vaping. It's disgusting, and I need to stop. It's like I have to do one bad thing to myself.
It is. No, I agree. You have to have.
You've got to have a vice.
Important to have one thing or another.
Yeah.
So.
Do you know what, Andrew? I have really, really enjoyed this episode. I really like you, and I'm going to message your lovely partner and tell her so in a moment, because you are so engaged with, I want to say, with the process. Like, you are so committed, and you have been, and it sounds like you have been so throughout the whole of Vivian's illness. And I hope you know what an incredible role model you are for your son.
Don't
might not feel it all the time, but I'm telling you, and my word is law on this podcast. So
yeah, I have, I said before, I have had a fundamental change of life. It was like an epiphany. I've gone from very materialistic. We had a nice life, earned a lot of money and lots of possessions and cars and a house, and I have none of that anymore now. But what I have got is just this overwhelming urge to help people and talk about mental health. And so I work in the community now along with VR. I've a mental health first aider. I've done my suicide course, and all these sorts of things that I just have this massive desire to. I mean, if I turn the camera around and you saw the state of my house, absolute chaos.
I've got one tiny bit that's behind me right now.
But when it comes to wanting to do things for the people around me, it's like, that's just all I want to do now, and it's been a massive change. And it's, I don't know whether it's because of that I am where I am now, but it's
I think you realise that money doesn't matter. If somebody's got cancer, there's no amount of money or possessions that's going to buy you anymore. And we're very fortunate. We have a nice house and we have nice holidays, but I'd sacrifice all of those to be safe and happy and content. Well, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me on.
Actually, I might get you on my other podcast to talk about men's mental health, because that's something I want to cover. So I'll definitely message you. But
thank you for having me on today. Thank you for allowing me to say some things that I don't always talk about.
You did really well. You did really, really well. For anybody who is listening out there, particularly the boys, we hope that you've managed to find something in this episode, even if it's just a little bit of comfort. You can message me.
That's the thing.
Yeah, we both cried, so you owe us that. Give us a little review for that at least. You can message me. You can message me at the Instagram, which is widowed AF, or my own Instagram, which is Rosie Gill Moss, and I will try and get back to any questions. But for now, take care of yourselves out there. Lots of love. Thank you for listening. If you found this episode helpful, hit follow or subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And if you think someone else may benefit from this, please do share. We'd also really appreciate a quick review. It helps more people find the show. Thank you again, and see you next time on Widowed AF.